First off, I'm not a murderer. I mean, what would you do if some drunken idiot grabbed your girlfriend's ass in a parking lot? Of course I said something to the guy. He got on my face, started shoving me, and I took a swing at his jaw before I even knew what I was doing. But that doesn't mean I wanted to kill the guy. How was I supposed to know he was gonna fall and crack his skull open on the damn curb? Unfortunately for me, the jury didn't see it that way. Boom, hear that? That's a cell door sliding shut. That's 20 years in state prison. The girl who I thought I was going to impress broke up with me before the case even went to trial. After my first day of sitting in a piss-reeking concrete cube, watching a cartel hitman do push-ups on the floor, I swore to myself that I would do anything to get out. And that's how I ended up here. The bald man in the white coat was called Dr. something or other. I don't remember his name. Just his cruel little smile, and the way the light reflected off his thick glasses. At the time, I was too busy reeling from his offer. My sentence would be reduced, he promised, to the amount of time it took to complete certain experiments. And all I had to do was agree to participate. I wouldn't have to undergo any life-altering surgeries or take any strange drugs. Just go to certain locations and follow the instructions that I'd be given. I kept waiting for the punchline. I glanced up at the guards, but they refused to meet my gaze. Later, I would come to understand the look on their faces. It was disgust. They'd seen all this before. They'd heard whispers of what I was about to get myself into, and it made them sick. At the time, though, I thought I'd won the lottery. Nothing is more valuable to a prisoner than his freedom, and now I had it within my grasp. Or so I thought. I signed a bunch of paperwork that I couldn't be bothered to read. Then the guards loaded me into the back of a high-security van. Something about the anonymity of it bothered me. There were no logos, company names, or signs to indicate who was taking me away. But what was I going to do? Back out? Go back to my goddamn cell because of a little uh-oh feeling? Minutes later, I was watching the prison gates disappear into the distance through a tiny plexiglass window. I couldn't help but laugh. Freedom, baby! I could practically taste it, along with something else. There was a sort of hissing noise. A sick, sweet smell like rotten bananas began to fill the sealed compartment, and everything went black. When I awoke, I was laying on the floor of a windowless, padded cell. The bastards had drugged me, and that wasn't all. I'd been stripped and redressed in a weird orange jumpsuit with a hard, metallic something embedded beneath the skin of my neck. An implant? I pounded on the thick cell door, demanding an explanation, but of course, none came. 2 days passed like that, although I could only count them by the dimming of the lights and the trays of tasteless food that were slid through a slot in my cell door. I'd never been to solitary confinement, but after just 48 hours of staring at nothing, I thought I had some idea of its horror. If my psychotic ex-cartel hitman cellmate had walked through the door, I would have hugged him and wept for joy. Life, color, anything but those sterile white walls. On the third day, a different buzzer sounded. With their full Kevlar body armor and face-hiding visors, the personnel who shoved me into the corridor hardly seemed human. They marched me past hundreds of tiny cells just like mine, before loading me into the back of yet another unmarked white van. 3 other men in orange jumpsuits identical to mine were already sitting on its benches. Hey, do any of you guys know what's going on? The door slammed, and a familiar rotten banana smell poured into the compartment. I knew what was coming, but it was still a surprise when I awoke, hours later, with my cheek resting against a sticky linoleum floor. I brought a hand to my skull and groaned. I was getting pretty fucking sick of it. Hello? Hello? Can you all hear me? The voice was coming from inside my own head. I glanced around. I saw a look of shock on the faces of 3 men around me. They were experiencing the same thing. Okay, you need to tell me what the fuck is going on, or I'm gonna lose my temper real quick. A scrawny white guy in an orange jumpsuit just like mine was digging a finger around in his ear, as though trying to quiet the voice in his skull. Your implant will detonate and terminate you if you attempt to leave the test site without permission, so I wouldn't do anything hasty if I were you. The voice responded irritably. I'm Dr. Green. I'm in charge of this experiment, and I'll be giving you instructions via your implant from this point forward. Subject 4211, stop trying to remove your implant. Attempted removal of an implant is grounds for termination. I turned around and saw a large, tattooed black man in another orange jumpsuit trying to cut into his own neck with a butter knife he found. "My name isn't Subject 4211, he grunted defiantly. "It's Teague." My eyes darted around the room, but I couldn't see any cameras. How the hell was Dr. Green spying on us? "I'm Caesar." A long-haired Hispanic man got to his feet beside me and shook Teague's hand. "Subject 4213, do not touch other subjects without permission," Dr. Green screeched. "That fucker sure is annoying, isn't he?" Caesar smirked. "Hey, you guys think there's anything to eat around here? I'm starving." The four of us were standing in the cramped kitchen of an outdated apartment. Yellow linoleum floor, pea green cabinets, peeling Formica countertops. Based on the dust covering the bare light bulb that lit the miserable scene, the place hadn't been lived in for a long time. I looked out the grimy window. We were on the 4th floor of some apartment complex, and in the twilight gloom outside, I could see caution tape and sealed-off streets. The eerie silence told me that we were the only people left in the whole building. What the hell was going on? "So how can we help you, Doctor?" Lee, the scrawny white guy, sneered. "Good question, Subject 4210. Dr. Green overlooked the sarcasm. "All you need to do is spend the evening in this apartment. Feel free to shower, prepare food, and engage in other activities as normal." "So what's the catch?" Teague wondered aloud. The only response was the sound of Caesar rustling around in the cobwebby cabinets. "Holy shit! Look! Spam! This stuff never goes bad!" While Caesar got ready for the big feast, I went to take a piss. Under the circumstances, I should have known better than to walk into the bathroom without turning the light on first. The moment I stepped into the darkness, the door slammed shut behind me. I could hear someone breathing in the darkness behind me. "Who's there?" I shouted, fumbling for a light switch. Instead, my hand brushed against something warm, sticky, and alive. I backed away, only to bump into more of the nasty stuff. The more I struggled, the more it closed in around me. I felt like a fly caught in a fleshy web. The breathing was louder, more excited now. I could feel a heartbeat in the mucousy goo around me. It squeezed tighter, cutting off my air supply. The animal in me started punching wildly. My knuckles ripped through the nastiness and connected with the bathroom wall and something plastic, a light switch. The moment the lights flickered on, the weird breathing disappeared. Suddenly, the only horrifying thing nearby was the floral pattern wallpaper. "Note Rule 1, Dr. Green's voice suddenly boomed in my head. "Always turn the light on before going into the bathroom." "Dr. Green? Hey!" I shouted. "Hey, what is this?" "Just go about your business, Subject 4212. You've still got a long time before dawn." "You got a face like you dropped your dick in the toilet." Teague laughed when I came back to the kitchen. "What took you so long? I've been wanting to take a shower." I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered, remembering how the damn bathroom had tried to eat me alive. "Man, you know how long it's been since I've been able to take a nice, long, hot shower without looking over my shoulder?" "Yeah, right. Like anybody would want to fuck your roly-poly ass," Lee snorted. Teague just rolled his eyes and pulled down a curtain to use for a towel. I remember thinking that for a bunch of supposedly dangerous convicts, the four of us were actually getting along all right. "Remember to turn the lights on first," I shouted after him. The old pipes groaned and shuddered as the shower kicked on, but I didn't hear any screams. I let out a sigh of relief. "Seriously though," Caesar asked, still chowing down on his brick of Spam. "What happened in there? I heard Green say something about a rule." Night had fallen on the empty apartment building and the blocked-off streets outside. I realized that we hadn't explored the entire unit yet. I didn't want any more nasty surprises like the one in the bathroom. There was nothing in the living room to our right, except for a sagging couch facing a bare wall and a rocking chair. To our left was a hallway. The floors were dusty, the walls stained yellow by age and cigarette smoke. In fact, the whole place smelled like cigarettes, even though none of us had been smoking. I nervously flicked on the hallway light. A scarred, bony hand grabbed my shoulder and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was only Lee. "Man, what are you so worked up about? It's just a hallway." He shouldered past me. Look, no booby traps, no boogeyman. My heart was in my throat as he walked up to the first door, yanked it open, and started shrieking. I screamed too and ran to him, trying to pull him away from whatever was inside. But the closet was empty. Lee laughed until he cried. I could hear Caesar applauding in the kitchen. I groaned and walked back out of the hallway. You should have seen your face, Lee chuckled, still wiping away tears. He opened the next 3 doors. Okay, we got a bedroom, another closet. Lee's words died in his throat, and I thought I could see why. Bare footprints had appeared on the floor, beginning at the quadruple locked front door. Now that I was looking more closely, some of the scratches on the door's scuffed up metal surface looked an awful lot like fingernail marks. The steps were getting closer to Lee and picking up speed. What the fuck? Lee muttered. He started to run, and the invisible thing behind him did too. Its steps thundered over the floorboards with incredible speed, and no matter how hard Lee sprinted, it just wasn't enough. The hallway stretched and extended in front of him like something out of a cartoon. From my perspective, Lee was actually getting further away, becoming smaller and smaller, a tiny, desperate, terrified dot. And finally, nothing. The freakishly stretched out hallway returned to normal. The pounding footsteps stopped. Lee was gone. The last bite of Spam dropped from Caesar's fork in front of his open mouth. Ahem. Dr. Green cleared his throat in our ears. Note down rule 2. Don't run in the hallway. I walk away for 15 minutes, and look what happens. Teague came back from the shower, still wiping water droplets from his bald head with the apartment's curtains. He walked into the empty living room and sat down on the couch, which seemed ready to break under his weight. I don't get why y'all want to keep messing with this place. Why not just have a seat, stretch our legs, and wait for the sun to come up? Instead of answering him, Caesar spewed vomit all over the kitchen floor. I guess that Spam wasn't still good after a... He let more Spam fly with another sickening heave that splattered all over my shoes. Gross, man! Teague wrinkled his nose. Caesar was on all fours now, retching until there was nothing left to puke up. The spreading puddle was the pinkish color of stomach medicine, and maggots were squirming in it. No, not maggots, not exactly. Maggots didn't have so many eyes and legs, or heads covered in tiny tendrils. I cried out and stomped on one that tried to crawl up my pant leg. Teague joined me, and the two of us started doing a hideous dance, stomping on the weird white worms as Caesar puked them up. What worried me was that they seemed to be getting bigger. Soon Caesar was choking, unable to get the horrible things out of his mouth. His hands went to his throat, his face turned purple, and Caesar collapsed face down in the puddle of smashed maggots and pink goo. Teague made a half-hearted attempt at the Heimlich maneuver before we accepted that he was gone. Neither of us wanted to touch his sticky, pink-stained jumpsuit, but we couldn't just leave him there. Teague and I grabbed Caesar under his armpits, dragged him to the hall closet, and rolled him inside. I kept an eye out for dusty footprints in the hallway, but none appeared. We heard a loud thump from the kitchen. It sounded like it came from the cabinets. I reached out nervously and opened the kitchen cabinet just a crack. The can of Spam was back. Note rule 3. Don't eat any food found in the upper right cabinet. This is fucked up! Teague yelled at Dr. Green's disembodied voice. Then he looked at me and took a deep breath. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stay right here in this kitchen, and we're not gonna touch anything or eat anything or say anything. Not till the sun comes up. You with me? I nodded. There was no clock in the half-empty apartment, and each minute oozed by more slowly than the last. My eyes kept drifting to the 2 bedroom doors that Lee had left half open before he met his end. Was it just me, or did I see movement there? Pale eyes that watched us from the dark? I felt a suicidal urge to investigate the bedrooms, or at the very least close their doors. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and I knew Teague could feel it too. The sensation that we weren't alone any longer. I looked over. I shouldn't have. An old woman in a nightgown was rocking back and forth in the living room rocking chair. Tangled gray hair hung over her face, and a cigarette burned between her fingers. What are you two doing in my apartment? She rasped, and licked her lips with an enormous crimson tongue. I caught a glimpse of her teeth, jagged, shark-like, crammed into a mouth too wide to be human. Teague looked at me, then straight down at his shoes, and I understood. We weren't going to interact with her, no matter what.
I asked you boys a question.
The old woman's voice boomed through the apartment. I smelled smoke. Fire crept from her cigarette onto the rocking chair, burning the stained walls, the dusty floor, and the whole horrible apartment. The flames licked at my face, but I still refused to look at her.
Young people today have no respect.
Just like that, the smoke, the flames, and the old woman all vanished. Teague and I both breathed for the first time in what felt like forever.
Note Rule 4. Say nothing to the old woman.
Dr. Green cleared his throat.
Well done, subjects 4211 and 4212. You've made it much longer than the others.
The others? How many more of us had been through here? We were still getting over the shock of it when we heard movement from inside the closet. Lurching, pounding. Caesar's corpse burst out into the hallway. The tendrils of the huge maggot-like thing in his distended mouth reached for us hungrily. Others were pushing their way out from his nose, ears, and eye sockets. As the Caesar thing staggered toward us, I knew that there would be no ignoring this one. Teague and I threw everything we could get our hands on at Caesar's walking corpse. Dinner plates, a couple bent forks, the dusty Spam can inside the cabinet. Nothing slowed it down. The tendrils of the giant albino insect between Caesar's jaws whipped through the air. We ducked and dodged, but one managed to wrap around Teague's bald head. The thing inside Caesar's corpse was trying to pull itself onto him instead.
Oh, hell no!
Teague grunted, sawing at the hideous tendril with a butter knife. The thing screeched as Teague cut through it. The Caesar thing chased us in circles around the kitchen island, the couch, and the rocking chair like a demented skit from a children's cartoon. An idea popped into my head.
Shove it in the bathroom!
I jumped up and down like a cheerleader to get the Caesar thing's attention when it turns its disgusting tendrils toward me. Teague ran up behind it with the rocking chair and shoved the walking corpse into the very open, very dark bathroom. It happened the same as before. The moment the Caesar thing was inside, the door slammed shut and that weird, moist breathing noise started up in the darkness on the other side. The Caesar thing slammed against the bathroom walls, trying to break free, but it was no use. The worms inside of it shrieked horribly as the bathroom devoured it. After what felt like an eternity, the bathroom door creaked open again. There was nothing inside but a dripping faucet and a moldy shower curtain. Caesar's corpse and the awful worms were gone. Teague dropped the rocking chair and leaned back against the wall, panting.
Man, I don't know how much more of this I can take.
Me neither.
I shook my head and squatted down beside him. I grabbed his hand to help him to his feet. But when I pulled, Teague didn't move. His eyes widened with fear. I tugged harder. Nothing. Slowly but surely, the big man was sinking into the apartment wall.
Get the knife, man!
Teague screamed.
Cut me out of this!
I fumbled in the shattered pieces of plate and silverware that we'd thrown at Caesar. But by the time I turned back around, it was too late. Teague was just a pair of kicking feet that disappeared into the wall.
Note Rule 5.
Dr. Green's voice chirped in my head.
Don't touch the walls after 4 a.m.
My rattling breath seemed to echo in the empty apartment, and I realized that whatever other horrible things might happen that night, I'd be facing them alone. It was too much to bear. I dropped to my knees and sobbed among the broken dishes. I considered dragging a broken piece of ceramic down my wrist and ending it all, but who was to say that would be the end? For all I knew, dying in this hellish apartment just meant my spirit would be trapped here forever like all the others, ever hungry, ever hateful. I forced myself to think. After 4 a.m., Dr. Green had said, which meant that I had less than 3 hours before dawn. If I could just hold out a little longer. Something made me sniff the air. A familiar smell. Cigarette smoke. I looked up from the mess on the floor and saw corpse-like feet stuffed into fluffy slippers and the hem of a burnt nightdress. I shrieked and scrambled toward the hallway. The old woman followed, running her crimson tongue across her monstrous teeth. There was nowhere left to run, except for the 2 bedrooms that hadn't been explored yet. But I'd just have to take my chances. At the last minute, I remembered to walk, not run, down the hallway. I pulled a door open at random, slipped inside, and locked it shut behind me. Being careful not to touch the yellowed walls, I brushed the air in search of a light switch. A ceiling light flickered on, and I heard the voice before I even finished turning around.
What are you doing in my room, mister?
A small boy sat up in bed, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I was standing in a completely ordinary child's bedroom. Stuffed animals sat on a wooden toy chest. Picture books were stacked on the night table, and a hamper full of dirty clothes leaned dangerously in the closet. Posters of space and astronauts lined the walls, and there were even a few model rockets hanging from the ceiling. My eyes fixed on a calendar on the wall, November of 1993.
Well, as long as you're here.
The boy shrugged.
Wanna play? I've got some dinosaurs.
The old woman was throwing her weight against the door, digging her nails and teeth into the soft wood. It was just a matter of time. The boy didn't seem to notice her, but somehow I doubted that would help when she burst through the door. Playing with dinosaurs. I couldn't think of any better way to spend my last few minutes alive. I sat down on the boy's bed with a plastic brontosaurus.
I've got 3 velociraptors,
The boy warned.
The brontosaurus is gonna have to be pretty smart to get away. And I guess we're all out of luck.
I laughed.
Didn't these guys have a brain the size of a baseball or something?
The boy just shrugged and moved his velociraptors through the valleys, created by folds in the blankets.
Let me ask you a question.
I went on.
How long have you lived here? Just a few weeks,
His face darkened.
but I don't like it. There's something bad about this place. We had to move in here with Grandma because Mom lost her job, and I think it's making Grandma crazy.
The boy put aside his dinosaurs and leaned in close.
Sometimes, when Mom's not listening, Grandma says there's a presence here with us. And then she says that she's got to send us to heaven and burn the place down before the presence can get us.
The boy wrinkled his nose.
I used to like Grandma, apart from the cigarettes, but now she's just scary.
A presence. Cigarettes. Grandma. The old woman. I'd been so wrapped up in the boy's story that I hadn't noticed that the scratching at the door had stopped.
I need you to do something for me, okay?
I handed the kid his brontosaurus and got to my feet. Something told me that the longer I stayed here, the more danger he was in.
When you go to school tomorrow, I want you to ask for somebody called a counselor. And I want you to tell that counselor everything you just told me about how your grandma wants to send you and your mom to heaven before the presence gets you. Can you do that for me?
The boy nodded.
I won't ever see you again, will I?
He mumbled.
Probably not.
I grimaced.
But trust me, it's for the best.
I pressed my ear to the door. There was no weird mouth breathing or sound of teeth scraping on wood, but that didn't mean it was safe. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway. Of course, it was empty. And so was the bedroom behind me. The boy, whoever he was, seemed to be back in November of 1993 where he belonged.
Rule 6. If a boy appears, play with him.
Dr. Green sounded exhausted. I almost made it. But who were the boy and the old woman? What had happened to the mother? And how did the strangling thing in the bathroom, the footsteps in the hallway, and all the rest of it tie together? My head hurt too much to think about it. When I closed my eyes, I saw Lee, chased down an endless hallway by invisible footsteps. Caesar, puking white worms into a puddle of blood. Teague, reaching out for me as the wall swallowed him up. I wondered if the 3 of them would join the chorus of other nightmares that haunted this place, and shuddered at the thought. Speaking of other nightmares, something drew my attention to the end of the hallway, where a puddle of Caesar's bloody puke coagulated in front of the closet. Only now, footsteps were appearing in it. The thing that had taken Lee. As the bloody footsteps came closer, I fought my natural instinct to run. Instead, I turned and walked as calmly as I could toward the door of the next bedroom. I turned the knob, not daring to look over my shoulder, and flicked on the light before stepping inside. I let out a sigh of relief. Another empty room with yellowed walls and dusty floors. I closed the door as softly as I could and listened to the invisible thing walk to the end of the hallway where it seemed to vanish. I hadn't panicked. I hadn't run. I made it. I'm still not sure what made me look up. The shadow, the breath on the back of my neck, or just the unavoidable feeling of being watched. When I did, I saw what had happened to the boy's mother.
She said she'd send us to heaven.
The bloodless corpse on the ceiling gurgled.
And she did.
I couldn't tell whether it was the rope around her neck or the nails hammered to her body that were holding her in place. As I gazed up in horror, one of her arms ripped free and swooped down toward me. I ducked, but her arm twisted on its rotten tendons, grabbing me by my throat, lifting me toward the ceiling. My feet kicked empty air. She was going to strangle me and impale me on the same nails that had impaled her.
Note Rule 7. When you walk into the second bedroom, don't look up.
Dr. Green sighed.
Well, I guess that's as far as we get tonight. We'll bring in another batch next week.
Hot blood poured down the front of my jumpsuit as the woman's fingernails dug into my neck. I could feel the bony hardness of them as they passed behind my jugular and ripped out the implant. It clattered to the floor, a nasty silver mess of blood-stained cables and transmitters. She lowered me to the floor beside it.
Go,
The dead woman on the ceiling coughed.
before the others get you.
She didn't have to tell me twice. I pressed my sleeve against my neck to stop the bleeding and peeked out into the hallway. There was nothing there. Nothing that I could see, anyway. I tiptoed toward the front door, doing my best to keep quiet. I slid open the chain lock, the deadbolt, and the twist lock. Cigarette smoke. I cursed and turned around. The old woman dragged herself jerkily down the hallway toward me. Flames filled the apartment behind her.
And just where do you think you're going?
She croaked.
The hell away from here!
I shouted back, pulling open the door and slamming it shut behind me as I ran. I looked over my shoulder, expecting to see smoke and flames. But I saw only an anonymous apartment door with a number and a peephole, identical to all the rest. It could have been anyone's apartment, even yours. I'm on the run now, showering with trial gym memberships, traveling by bus using someone else's documents, and typing this story on a library computer. I don't doubt for a second that the people who used me for their experiment will catch up to me eventually. But before they do, I want the world to know the truth. You know those weird lists of supernatural rules you find on the internet? Some of them are written in the blood of people like me. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.